Joe. Yeah, we got this house like 3 years ago, and 1 year ago-ish started building this, and just about now it feels like we're. I would have said it was done like half a year ago, and then some stuff started collapsing, so now it almost feels like it's done. So, but yeah, obviously, what is a natural swimming pool specifically? And this is the diagram from the book that I used sort of as a guide to make this. Generally, there are a lot of different types of natural swimming pools, but generally, it is any swimming pool that uses plants, biofiltration, and smart design to keep the water clean. So by smart design, I mean things like putting a berm around it to prevent runoff, which I'll get into. Biofiltration, I'll explain as well. That is separate from plants. Plants is pretty obvious; they pull nutrients out of the water. So you might think that just looks like a pond that I happen to swim in. It's not just like it's not like the difference between a violin and a fiddle. It is actually there are a few key differences. So aeration is one. That prevents anaerobic decomposition of organic matter. You're always going to have organic matter ending up in your pond, and you don't want it to decompose anaerobically. That would create like methane and get sort of bad bacteria that you don't want in there, bad smells, things like that. So aeration is important. And you can also achieve aeration through plants, submerged plants. So it doesn't necessarily have to be powered, although in this case it is. Biofiltration. So there's this really neat thing that happens when you put just about anything underwater, where it develops, assuming the water's not chlorinated, it develops a biofilm on it. So you can the gravel's pretty new, so not the gravel, but you can take just about anything in there, feel it, and it'll just be sort of slippery. And that is a problem in a lot of cases, but in one specific case, it is very much a benefit, because that means it's been colonized by beneficial bacteria that will really effectively clean the water. So the whole idea of this is you have gravel and sand beds around the edges, and sort of this aerated pumping system that pulls water through those beds, lets the plants take nutrients out, but also, actually more importantly, lets this beneficial bacteria take nutrients out of the water, and that's the biofiltration. And then obviously the other main difference is that you'll have cleaner water. So this is,
that's cool.
For those who didn't hear me say this before already, this is just a glass of water from the pond. It might even look a little blue. That's because we're testing this dye that sort of prevents algae growth and whatnot. We didn't have problems with algae growth. We just thought it might be cool to dye it blue. It's sort of, we might experiment with it more and whatnot. But other than that, it's basically perfectly clear. I'm sure you guys have all seen ponds, like usually koi ponds that are super green. So you have to be careful with your design to avoid that, so that people are actually going to want to swim in it. Not that you can't swim in a pond with algae in it, it's not harmful or anything, but it might be a sign that you have other things that could be harmful. So yeah, one way you accomplish that, one of the most important ways, is to avoid runoff. So instead of just letting, if this were just a straight slope into the pond, which you often have, you would get any sort of nutrients that are on the surface, or mostly manure is your main concern, bird poop, things like that. Any of those nutrients and potential vectors for pathogens are just going straight into the water. So you can make a swale and then a berm, and then, so in this case, this is talking about a pond without a liner. You can have this really neat thing that happens where the water will sort of sink in here, and then it'll be naturally clean because it's going through the soil, and then you can have, so this would be something you would not swim in, and this could be something potentially you could swim in. And then the one on the right is more similar to, in Michigan we're pretty flat, so it's more similar to what you're going to be seeing, and that's sort of what I've done here, which is you take some of the dirt that you excavate out and you put it around the pond, and that way there's very little runoff that's going to be going into the pond. So that's one of the level one things to watch out for, because even if you do everything else right, if you've got a bunch of runoff, you're going to have issues. Another big one is to avoid filling it with just water from your hose like you would think you would do. Probably a lot of green ponds that you've seen are because of this, because they put phosphates in city water to, I think, to protect the pipes. And that, so phosphorus is the limiting nutrient for algae growth in most water. So like not, we're used to nitrogen being the most important thing up on land, but usually the most important one for algae is phosphorus. So you want to have as little phosphorus as possible. So that means you either use rainwater or like, you know, just letting it fill, obviously naturally, but you're generally not going to have, anyway, you're not going to have enough just falling on the pond itself to fill it. So you're going to want to supplement generally. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. You want to supplement with like roof water. A good thing to have, because obviously birds can poop on your roof too. Good thing to have that I have not set up yet is a first flush system. You guys might know this if you researched water storage at all, off-grid rainwater storage, but that would just direct like 5 gallons or 10 gallons or 50 or whatever, the first stuff that comes off your roof when you have a rain event. And then that would go off to the side or just get dumped or whatever, and then the rest would go into the pond. Yeah, it's called the first flush system. I don't have that, I just have a tube that comes out of the gutter.
And the one that goes to everyone over there, right?
Yeah, we use that sometimes as well. That's actually better if you can store the water for a while. Obviously in darkness, that will let a lot of the bad junk settle, and then you can pull it off without getting, you know, any stuff that might have been on your roof that is settled to the bottom.
Do we like weave a tarp over that? Or, like,
Oh, that's like the guy who sold it to me.
Okay.
Just like a polyethylene cover. Yeah, it's just a giant trash bag. Yeah,
It works.
Yeah, it does work. It doesn't look as good as the thing you were supposed to sell me, but it's all good. Okay, and sadly, no ducks. Ducks will try and, first of all, if you keep ducks, you're going to keep them out. But even if you don't, in the spring, ducks will see your beautiful natural swimming pool and think this is a great place for me to start a family. But you're going to have to scare them away. You take 10 seconds, have your Tony Soprano moment, and get excited about ducks being in your pool. And then after that, you're going to want to scare them away. I actually have you guys can see a motion activated sprinkler right there, right next to the heron statue thing.
Yeah.
That's for scaring the ducks away.
Wow.
They
Good call.
obviously, the main thing you probably think of is they poop in the water. That is part of it. Another part of it is something called swimmer's itch. If you know what that is, you can get it from swimming sometimes in lakes and stuff. And it is a parasite. It's a duck parasite that sometimes gets confused and tries to use you as a host. It will die within a couple hours. It doesn't actually, successfully parasitize you, but it will itch. It's no fun. So
I've had it for weeks, right?
maybe, I don't know. We thankfully haven't had it, so I don't know exactly how long it lasts. But you're not going to want to let ducks have a home in your natural swimming pool. So you want to scare them away. Yeah, because ducks, they're the actual host for the parasites, so they'll bring it in. Okay, cool. So that's the differences between natural swimming pool and a pond. So now I'm going to talk about the advantages of a natural swimming pool over a chlorinated pool, like we got over there, my neighbor's yard.
Oh.
So,
No shade, but just some shade.
Not everybody knows about this. So obviously, number one, no chlorine. Start with that. It's pretty straightforward. I have very sensitive skin. I definitely get chlorine rashes. I don't know if any of you guys do, but there's more than just chlorine. If you're not managing your pool well, your chlorine pool well, and you're like using, putting in like this, the stuff in the bottom left and bottom right, that's from like the data sheets from, and like the bottles from the chemical that Maddie used to work at a pool. She said she would use in their pool, and the data sheet was just full of like irritant information and like can cause serious eye damage and all this stuff. Concerning if you obviously if you use it correctly, it's not gonna be a problem, but you might screw up, use too much, have a zero in the wrong place.
And even with normal usage, we have to tell people not to swim immediately after we put it in because of skin irritation.
Yeah, so you avoid all that by going natural, so that's cool. Environmentally friendly, this is obviously a big reason. Little to no concrete is used, so concrete, if you guys have probably been hearing the word about the sand shortage, Also, cement itself is pretty environmentally taxing, and then moving all of that, it's a big carbon impact. It supports wildlife instead of trapping it. So obviously, you guys have heard of like frogs getting stuck in ponds, or not ponds, sorry, pools, and then dying. That's no fun. People have those little ladders. Obviously, you don't need that here, so that's nice. We instead had probably tens of thousands of tadpoles in there this spring, so that was cool. They're delightful swimming buddies. And yeah, it supports beneficial insects, dragonflies, which I'll talk about.
Oh, yeah.
What about mosquitoes?
Well,
Yeah,
I'll get there.
It supports them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, birds and stuff. Everyone has a use for
Birds except ducks.
yeah, no ducks.
Yeah.
They'll get some use out of it. It's just, I guess, scare them away. The plants sequester carbon, obviously, and then lower energy usage. So I'll have an actual chart here later, but that air compressor there, it's 45 watts, and that is the only electricity that goes into the whole thing.
And it's very quiet. It is currently running, right?
Yeah, it runs 24/7. It doesn't need to run 24/7, but I'm just too lazy to put a timer on it yet. But yeah, super low energy usage. All right, let's see if this video plays. Yeah, so this is a little frog.
Little baby.
So these are actually things that I've taken. These are the deer
Oh.
having a drink, little fawn playing around.
Maybe fell in. Maybe fell in.
Got right back out though. That's fine.
That's
One
so,
more time?
One more time. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's so fast. We did,
Seven more times.
Sure.
yeah.
I could full screen it. It wouldn't be.
Let's see.
I really just want to watch him fall.
He's just playing. That's neat that they found it back here.
Yeah. So this is before I decided that the deer in my backyard weren't compatible with my sanity. So that's before I built that house there, and then one over here. They still do get in occasionally, and they have, I've got plenty of stuff for them to forage in the front yard if you're feeling bad for the deer. But I needed a space to be able to garden without them,
Yeah.
and not have them fall in and collapse my walls.
Wow.
They didn't collapse my walls. That was purely a design error, which we'll talk about. But there's that, and then I already showed Linda this, but this is another video. I see this just about every morning. Bunch of
Isn't
birds
that cute?
taking little bird baths on the shore right behind you there. It's just one of my favorite things to watch. They'll do it sometimes while I'm swimming in there. They won't notice me, and then I'll splash or something, and then they'll all fly away. But super fun, super peaceful, and it's helps them stay clean, get the parasites off them, and stuff. So
Now you said that you made a boo-boo on your thing when you had the deer in there, or what was that?
Oh, the wall collapsing?
they did not collapse the walls. The walls collapsed on their own because of I used burlap. I'll
Okay.
get it later in the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I learned. Lower maintenance than a chlorine pool. You're not going to look like this overwhelmed scientist on the left. You're going to look like this happy guy in the hammock on the right.
There we are.
There he is.
Because the system sort of manages itself once you set it up. There's really one thing you need to do, which is remove your dead plant matter in the fall. And then obviously if the pump breaks, you gotta replace the
He
pump.
just goes in the compost and
Throw that in
then
the
crushes
compost.
in the garden.
Yep. It's great for the garden, good source of fertility, which I believe is a
Wow.
later point. But yeah, that's the only maintenance. And by doing that, you're removing nutrients from the water and avoiding buildup and stuff. More ornamental, so a concrete pool, standard traditional pool. It looks neat. It's like a lawn. It's fine, But I think this is a lot cooler. And you can have so much fun with the design. Like we made this sort of kidney bean shape with a waterfall on the back there. It's a blast to decide like what plants to put where and getting the design and all. And I think it's beautiful to look at. So finally, you have a reason to buy more plants. So
That is your picture?
yeah. So I wanted to sneak a water lily photo in here because they close up around 5 p.m. and obviously they started at 6. So we didn't get to see the flowers. You guys can see the sort of closed flowers there sticking out of the water. This is delightful for me. I'm sort of a plant collector, gotta catch them all sort of person. So I got really into water lilies when I realized I could start growing them. They're a ton of fun. Same with bog plants, like specifically carnivorous plants. We have a lot of native carnivorous bog plants, like this pitcher plant, which you guys saw behind you.
Now fully flowering.
Yeah, it was just starting to flower in this photo, and now it's flowering. There's also Venus flytrap down here. So yeah, super fun, and a great way to expand the kind of stuff you can grow.
Hi.
Hello.
That's a little lost.
Oh, yeah.
Can I sit where I can sit?
There's a
Go
you
ahead.
can see it right here.
Wherever you want. And you could grab
Right
some
up-
food
right
if
up
you
front.
like.
Yeah. So obviously you can use it to grow food. So obviously you can grow any sort of aquatic plant or aquatic friendly plant that it happens to be edible. So these 4 are all things that I have in there right now. Top left is obviously sweet potato, then taro, which is a Japanese root vegetable, water mint on the bottom left, and then watercress on the bottom right. All 4 of those are in the pond right now, as well as cattails, which have been called the supermarket of the swamp. They're have a ton of edible stuff on them.
Except the fluffy part, right? You can't eat the top part?
Don't eat the
not a corn
forbidden
dog.
corn dog. Yeah, but everything else. Oh, I've got what's it called? Water parsnip. There's a cucumber plant that I just stuck a seed in sort of the moist soil on the edge.
That cucumber water.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that tastes good.
yeah. That actually, it's one of the tenets of permaculture is to like value the marginal, like edges. So like if you have something like an edge there where there's water going into and then sand that's going into sort of a drier area, you have an entire continuum of levels of moisture you can choose from. So if you just stick a seed in the perfect spot, then that cucumber is going to have all the water that it needs, but not too much, and you never have to water it. And I've never watered that thing. I've stepped on it 100 times, and it's still making it funny. Fish, etc. So the bottom left there is fingernail clams, and then crayfish if you're adventurous and want to add those to your pond. Those are sorts of things, at least fish are something you add to a more mature pond. I thought about adding some this year, but decided to wait. It's something you got to be careful with because they add a lot of nutrients, and once they're in, it can be hard to take them out. But, you know, in a mature system, fish are part of it, and you can eat those fish. I already mentioned this sort of already, but it's a source of fertility. So every time you're cleaning stuff out of the pond, you can use that for composting. That is useful in the garden, especially here where we've got this really dry soil. It can be hard to just have a lot of stuff that goes off on its own, and like how people would use comfrey, for example. It likes wetter soil. It wouldn't really do so well here. So it's good to have like sources of fertility that can really sort of take care of themselves. It's an emergency water supply, so you can't drink pool water, like chlorinated pool water, at least not in large amounts. But you can, at least in a mature system, you could drink this natural swimming pool water straight out of the pool. In my younger system, I'd run it through like a life straw or something, but there's some sort of filter. But even still, you've got
Boil it.
Yeah, boil it. Yeah, you've got, I think this is 25,000 gallons of water.
That's good.
So that's great for preparedness. Reduces mosquitoes. So obviously a lot of people think about mosquitoes and like, oh, this is great except for the mosquitoes. But mosquitoes, what they really like to breed in is like if you accidentally leave a bucket out and it fills with water for a month, that's sort of their ideal situation because they've got no predators in there and it's stagnant. This water is constantly being circulated. I think these airlift pumps, I think they move the entire contents of the pond like within a couple days. It's entirely filtered. And there are a ton of young dragonflies that actually live in the pond. So dragonfly nymphs, naiads, I think they're called. They are nature's most efficient predators. They eat mosquitoes like crazy. Yeah, absolutely. They attack helicopters. So,
And they're fairies.
So I'm able to sit out here in the middle of the night and not get bitten by mosquitoes, which is really cool. Obviously, it's not magical. You'll still find some occasionally, but they do come for your pool.
They came from
Right,
the
yeah. I mean,
world.
there's still, yeah, there's still mosquitoes, just like there's mosquitoes anywhere. But I was dubious of this because I've heard people say it, but I noticed a marked reduction in mosquitoes since we put in the pool.
All the frogs and toads helped too when they were.
Oh yeah.
Warmer water. So compared to an unheated chlorinated pool, obviously a heated pool is going to, you can have it do it at whatever temperature you want. But the nice thing about this design specifically, it's spread out. It's got those planted zones around the edge, and it's got the darker liner. So all of that works to capture more sunlight. So actually, if you walk into the pond, particularly later in the day, like now, or on a really sunny day, around the edges in particular, you know, it's like, wow, this is really warm. It's incredible. And it gets a little colder in the deep end, where, you know, obviously it's further from the sun. And you can put in like a de-stratification pipe to suck water out from the bottom and make things even. I haven't done that yet, but it's something I'm thinking about doing. And that would just sort of even out your water temperature. Cheaper to build, so if you're doing a DIY situation, which is what I did here, obviously this is me with a Google search, seeing like how much an in-ground pool costs. Obviously tens of thousands. But this is a little breakdown of sort of what the main costs that went into this one are. The biggest is the liner. It's a big piece of plastic, heavy plastic, thick, stretchy, strong. Very hard to tear. EPDM is the material. You can use cheaper stuff like polyethylene, but it's much, much less durable. You feel really silly like making one of these out of polyethylene and having a bunch of holes in it in a few years. So I would highly recommend EPDM, which is more expensive. So this size, yeah, you're looking at 1,500 to 3,000. Avoidable depending on soil type. So these have been done without liners. I have extremely sandy soil, so I didn't even consider it. But if you have clay soil, you can likely use other methods to get your ponds to seal. I'm not super experienced with that, but it's an option. Excavator, I highly recommend renting one. It's a ton of fun. It's like a video game. It's easier than you think. There's all sorts of fun tricks to it. And obviously it would be insane to dig all of this, especially if you don't have a ton of friends who are looking to help you out with such a strenuous activity. But you can do it, so that could be free, but I would say you could do it in a day for like 300, or I got an excavator for a week because I figured it would take me some time to learn. So that was 1,000. If you need to move the dirt off site, which I did, that's going to be about 1,000. Gravel is very important. You know, that's about what that would cost. The air pump is a necessity for this style, at least. I got sort of a nicer one because I want to make sure it's quieter and super durable. So there's sort of more of a $200 range.
Which one was that?
It's a Meadow, MEDO. Can't remember the name. But yeah, if anyone's curious, if anyone wants to do exactly this, I can send it. Anyway, so yeah, you could make one for as little as like $500, and that is true. People have done it. Cheaper to run. So a swimming pool pump. This is like average wattage. That's, you know, obviously a lot more than this little picture of a light bulb. Incandescent light bulb, 45 watts. That thing is 45 watts. They are using the same amount of energy. I think I did the calculation. I think that's like, to run that maybe half the day, which is what I should be doing instead of running it all the time. It would be like $30 a year to power the whole system, assuming 15 cents per kilowatt hour. And then DIY friendly, so obviously it's very difficult if you don't have specific experience. It's very difficult to make a concrete pool yourself. But this, it's absolutely possible to do yourself. Plenty of people have done it. A nice thing is that assuming that you don't need an inspection for just a pond in general, like just for digging in your municipality, which we did not. I didn't have to have any of the inspectors here, which...
Any permits?
Yeah, no permits, nobody from the Department of Making You Feel Sad to come by and make me feel sad.
But do we have to be a little bit careful about how we describe the pond?
Not
We have
really,
to say
no.
it's ornamental?
No, it's so there's different rules for pools and for ponds. Certainly if anyone from the city comes by, this is a pond, this is not a pool. but the
Pond
distinction,
that you can walk in.
yeah, they don't actually define the difference. So that's not really important. I
As
don't
long
think.
as you fall in,
It's important that someone wants to do
have
it.
an accident, like accident.
But is it required to have a fence around your pond?
Right. So if it is a pool according to the city, then it would require a fence. I think the main idea is, to prevent kids drowning in it, and you could avoid that by just having a gentle slope instead of needing a fence around it. But point is about the inspections, because the closest any electricity gets to the pond is right there. The rest is just an air tube that's going in. There's really no electrical shock danger. There's no need for an electrical inspection. Cool. So if I've convinced everyone that if they were to build a pool, then this is the tech they would build, I can talk about how to build it. Any questions first before I move on? Yeah.
Where did you get your water from when you were filling it?
So we let it fill over the course of like several months, and then I actually didn't have that. Oh no, I did. I had a big like this but longer drain pipe going into the pond, and then also obviously drain falling in it directly, and then that tank as well over there. That tank is like 300 gallons though, and this is, like I said, 20,000 plus.
Was this really like since winter, like between winter and?
Yeah, it's been several months. You can theoretically, I haven't tried this, you can maybe fill it with city water. Especially here, I think we've got cleaner city water or at least lower nutrients than some other places. If you try a phosphate remover, I don't have too much experience with that, but theoretically.
But if it's very hot summer, they can dry out. Like I
Yeah,
see some lakes that they dry out sometimes outdoor. They're
Mhm.
much bigger.
Yeah, so you
So
would.
dig it in fall, let it
Oh.
snow,
Yeah.
shovel all your
Dump
snow.
all of your
and-
snow.
Right. So we
yeah.
definitely had it filling over like the fall into winter, and yeah, it's been dropping a bit. You can, and I like top it up with the hose, or like I said, that there's a hose coming out of that downspout there. But you wouldn't want to fill the entire thing. That would with city water, unless you were treating it somehow, unless you had a plan for it, because that would lead to green water later on. Yeah, it's much easier to keep the nutrients low if you're starting with water that has basically no nutrients in it. This system, once it's established, can remove nutrients from the water really well because of all the plants and the biofiltration. But before it's established, it's not able to do that, so it's going to turn green right away. Cool. All right. So it's pretty straightforward. Well, actually, this is the one thing that's not straightforward. So the whole system is based around the idea of airlift pumps, aka bubble pumps. So it's literally as simple as. So we're going to redo this because the original demonstration was out of frame. So the main idea of an airlift pump is you just have an air stone like this you get from any aquarium store or online or a pond supply store. Generally, with most of the pumps, they'll be larger than this, but for the waterfall pump, I used a small one like this. You have that inside of some sort of tube, so you can just snake it in. And then you'll be hooked up to some sort of air compressor, but in this case, I can demonstrate what it looks like just using, my own lungs. So just using air and some tubing and an air stone, we're able to actually move water up several inches in this case and create suction as well from below. So this happens to be more efficient than a swimming pool pump, and it's safer, and it doesn't require electricity to be anywhere near the pond. So that's an airlift pump. This sort of seemingly obvious thing is able to move water really efficiently, really safely, so there's no big impeller motor that's gonna chop up a frog or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. It is able to, it's not able to lift water as easily as a regular pump, but just about everything else it does better. So everything in there, so we've got 4 bubble pumps. You see the spots that are bubbling at each side. So those are all not just bubbling, not just aerating, but they're inside of a tube like this, but larger. They're moving water up. out of the pipe, and then that creates suction, which pulls water down into the. Actually, I'll jump ahead so that you guys can see a diagram of what it looks like, and then I'll go back. So there we go. So that's what it looks like in terms of underneath the gravel and the sand. There's perforated pipe here, and then these 4 spots there are the bubble pumps. So it's pulling water into, so it's pushing water into the swimming zone, right? Which pulls it down through the gravel, through the sand, which is on top of it. And then that is what does the biofiltration, and then passes the water, constantly passing it past the plant roots, which also suck nutrients out. So that's how that works. Yeah, bubble pumps, they aerate at the same time as they move water. They're safe, they're DIY friendly, like I said. You don't need to have electricity, like wires or anything electrical in the water itself. Difficult to lift water high up, but not impossible. That waterfall is powered just by a little, like literally this size is what is running that waterfall. It's also hooked up to the skimmer, so it sort of powers both. I already sort of talked about this. Skimmer / solids filter, optional, but encouraged. Especially in the spring, we had a lot of like cottonwood floofs and things collecting on the top. It was like, boy, I wish at that point I didn't have one. I wish I had an automated like skimmer that would just pull all the stuff in. So that's what that bucket thing there. So I don't make your own. Buy one. That one, it works okay. You can buy just a regular pond skimmer. Yeah. So ground, right?
Good start.
Everyone needs at least one reminder not to puncture a gas line, so this is your reminder to not do that.
Call 411.
Yeah, I'll misdig. Dig a hole, excavator, like I said, a lot of fun. It doesn't need to be a special hole at this point. You don't need to worry about the contour. You sort of, at least in my case, I sort of shape that later with these sandbags. So this is all under the liner. So made a sandbag wall, sort of surrounding it, and that allowed the only real reason that we needed a sandbag wall is because we're sort of limited on space back here. If you're in a more rural area, you have more land, you can just sort of spread this out, have gentle slopes, and that way you can get down to a 6-foot depth without needing like vertical walls like this. This just sort of saves space. So that's optional, but that's what we did, and then you compact the soil behind it so you don't have compact the soil behind it so that you don't get cave-ins. Very important. Vince was super helpful building those walls. And then you lay the liner. You're going to need some friends for this. It's a big, heavy piece of plastic. Actually, the excavator that we had was very nice for this, carrying it just from the backyard because it's several hundred pounds. And then we just positioned it on the edge there, unrolled it in, and then by the time it was sort of mostly unrolled, it was light enough that we could roll it back out, and then unfold it from there. Yep. More sandbags on top. This was where I really screwed up. I used burlap here, which is recommended because you don't really... Plastic is fine down here. It's strong and it'll last forever, polypropylene specifically. But up here, I was like, well, I don't want plastic in the water. So I used burlap, and the idea is you mix cement with the sand or whatever you're filling the sandbags with, so that when the burlap eventually breaks down, you'll just be left with like a concrete block, basically. But the problem there is I didn't use enough cement, and some of them I didn't use any at all. I don't know what I thought would happen. Well, I do know what I thought would happen. I thought it would break down much slower, but instead the burlap was like gone within like 6 months. So that's where all those collapses that I was talking about are coming from. So there's a bunch of like sand in the swimming zone where there's not supposed to be, and gravel and stuff, and that's from all that burlap just breaking down and this sort of retaining wall collapsing. So don't make my mistake. Either use polypropylene and cover it with something so that the UV rays don't break it down, or use burlap and use enough cement. Maybe also add gravel as an aggregate. That's how concrete works, basic concrete rules. Concrete also, it cures much better underwater. Sort of counterintuitive, but if it's wet, then it will be much stronger as it's curing. So that's neat for this situation.
So how many sandbags did we end up filling?
Maybe we filled like 400. Oh, here.
Very good.
Wait here. If anyone does decide to do the sandbag method, you can also, the guy who wrote the book, concrete blocks, those are fine too. Not here. Alright, well, if anyone's curious, just ask me afterward. There's a really, I recommend this. We tried like 6 different ways of filling sandbags. They're all super slow and annoying. But I really recommend this one sandbag filler. It's like this red thing you fold it, you put it between your knees, you put a sandbag on, you just scoop sand right into it. It was super fast and convenient, way better than anything else we tried. So I highly recommend that if anyone decides to go the sandbag route. Okay, yeah.
If
So
you don't have sandy soil and you're excavating, can you do clay? Can you do your
yeah, you'd
clay
actually be
soil?
better off with clay because clay is going to hold together better, or at least some amount of clay. Obviously, if it's so clayey that you can't even like work it into a sandbag, that's going to be a problem. But if you're able to like get it in the sandbag, the clay is actually generally better. Sand is just like, the sand is really annoying because it's just like, as soon as those bags were gone, it just like, it all crumbled in.
Yeah, we had to go in with the snow shovel underwater and like shovel up the extra sand, get it out of the
Still
water.
have to do that. It's super hard to remove sand once it's in water.
Yeah.
That's honestly been a lot more work than a lot of the other stuff. So, yeah, if you're smart and you talk to people about your plans, unlike me, before you try your crazy experiments, you'll have much better luck.
But that's good you made mistakes because you can teach us
Exactly. Yeah.
not to do it.
We appreciate your mistakes.
Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want.
We learned.
So
It
now,
doesn't feel like kids playing at the beach, digging up sand all day.
yeah.
All that training you did came into play.
Yeah. So now we're switching to a top-down view, obviously. So this is that perforated drain pipe. We just make circles of it. The idea is sort of spreading out this sort of cross section of, or this this good surface area of that pulls in water through the gravel and whatnot. So that's going to be under the gravel, and then, like I said, it's going to be, the water's going to be going out through those bubble pumps that you're going to set up there. So that's step 1, is to lay out the perforated drain pipe. Then you cover it with gravel. I also did sand after this gravel, which is what the guy who wrote the book recommended. I don't recommend that. I disagree with him on this one. I think you should just use all gravel. I think there's little reason to use sand or subsoil as a substrate, because, and it's on a slide later, but there were some downsides to it. So cover with gravel, and now you lay your airline, so that's the white here, matching the actual color of the airline. I used PEX, just like cheap plumbing tube. It was fine. I think probably if I were to do it again, I would use actual, like from a pond store and a chrome store, like actual airline, air tubing. Because this stuff is pretty stiff, it's hard to work with, and the fittings are expensive, and they're pretty hard to get a good seal on. It worked out, but if I were to do it again, I'd probably use a different material. But yeah, the air is coming in here, sort of, this loop just sort of helps equalize the pressure, so that your far ones aren't like running way worse than your nearby ones. Yeah. Cover it with more gravel, and then it fills with water. You hook up your air stones. Like I said here, this is actually, that's the size that we use in those 4 air pumps. And then you add your plants. Yeah, you can, if you want to add a waterfall, just talk to me about it. It's so complicated, but it is very possible. Cool, yeah, and I touched on these pretty much all already, but mistakes, things I would avoid using sand, like you mentioned. The main problem that I found with it was, as soon as you walk in, you start like stirring up the water, all the sand gets lifted into the water, and this beautiful clear water that like you can see down 6 feet to the very bottom. Once that's stirred up, you can't see more than a foot. So that's no fun. Makes your pool seem a lot less impressive. It also, as a substrate, as a sort of biofiltration medium, it clogs itself up. It doesn't really let a lot of water through really well, so you get anaerobic situation. I would rather weeds, and then there was one day where I was getting bitten by a bunch of flies. I don't know if they were nesting here. I don't know if it was just a coincidence. It didn't hurt that bad, but it was annoying. And wasps and stuff, they all nest in the ground, pretty much in dirt. So if you can avoid giving them a habitat, it's convenient. I've never been stung by there's no like nests of wasps or anything in the pond, but I've never been stung because of the pond. But it's just it's a factor.
What kind of gravel did you use? Pea gravel?
I went with 3/4 inch round,
Okay.
which is you can just like take a look at it later if
So
you
you're
want.
saying no? Your mistake was you used sand as opposed to all gravel.
Exactly, yeah. If I were to do it again, I would put very little sand in, basically just like
At the base and then fill it with gravel.
not at the base, no layers or anything. Just like when the plants, when planting the plants, instead of planting them into like a big layer of sand, I would have used like burlap or like pots with like holes in them. Sort of what people usually do with ponds. Put like some compost in it because they need the nutrients anyway, and then just put that pot in the gravel. And I think they wouldn't spread as well, like the duck potato in particular. Oh, that's another one I forgot to mention. That's an edible one too. The duck potato really likes the sand, the muck. It sort of spreads really, really quickly through that, so that's cool. The cattails as well. There are benefits to it, but mostly I've found it to be downsides. So I would have done all of them.
Did you use the 3/4 gravel for like all parts? Because I saw you did gravel multiple times.
Yeah.
Or okay.
I did. I ended up sort of trying it out. I'm sure pea gravel would be fine too. The difference is pretty small. What I did was I went to the landscape store and like took off my shoes and like walked around in the piles of gravel. I was like, all right, which one feels the nicest to walk on? And I landed on that.
Yeah.
Tell us what color looks nice.
Yeah. I actually did a couple trays and like tested them out in there, like trying out like different colors and like what looks the best. So I ended up liking that. So yeah, I went with 3/4 inch round. Pea gravel would probably be fine. I'm sure it would be fine in fact.
Would that pea gravel on top maybe be a better filter instead of the sand?
Yeah,
Add
definitely.
extra.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Anything at that point would be better than the sand, because as long as it doesn't get kicked up, it mix around and cloud the water. That was my main issue with it.
Did you wash off your rocks before putting them in there, or did you use lead?
I did my best. I did my best. to
That
wash
stuff
them.
is dusty.
Yeah, it's annoying. I've sort of just been adding it slowly mainly. But yeah, I've done my best to rinse it off. Yeah, I already talked about the burlap. Right, so originally I planned to use, for my steps into the pond, planned to use pavers, like those concrete. I have a ton of them now because I have no use for them. Those concrete pavers, they seemed like they would make good steps. But like I said earlier, everything underwater gets like a sort of slippery biofilm. So it was dangerous, it was slippery, it was no good. So that's why instead I sort of had these retaining walls made out of this stuff, which honestly I'm not sure I would recommend either. But I'm still sort of experimenting with it. This is just all landscape edging. So I've got some retaining walls and then gravel inside of that. So the gravel is safe to walk on. I've not fully filled them with gravel yet, obviously, because there's still a ton of the driveway. But essentially, you can feel it well enough when you're walking in there now to know that it's sort of working. It's sort of, the slipperiness is not a problem because it's just a bed of gravel. It's not like a single surface that you're going to slip off of. So, yeah, rather than this, you can use wood as well. And it'll last quite a long time underwater. I discovered this group like a month or two ago, and it's amazing. People there are very knowledgeable. I wish I had like run my plans by someone there, or just like anyone, and I could have avoided a lot of these mistakes. So yeah, don't make a mistake. Talk to somebody. I'd be delighted if you want to build one. If you want to run your plans by me and ask you to help you design it. Yeah, I've been working on this constantly. It's full of water, which makes it a lot harder to work on. Finish your pond before it fills if you can. It's annoying to have your tools float away from you or like sink for like the 10th time. And then, yeah, this is a small mistake. But when planting, I didn't like add any fertilizer or compost or anything, because the idea is to remove nutrients from the water to prevent algae growth. But a lot of the plants, as you can see, are like sort of yellow, which is a good sign for the water clarity, but it means they're not getting the nitrogen that it needs, so I'm not growing like massive vegetables or anything. So that's something that I'm going to be working on in the future, is figuring out how to get them nutrients. fish could be, like I said,
Pee in the pool.
some people, there's a percentage of people that, like, whenever they enter any body of water, there's like a study on this, whenever they enter any body of water, they 100% immediately urinate.
Really?
Yeah. I
It
don't
feels
know.
like you're supposed to be able to, because it's sort of like you step into this. It's like, oh, it's a huge
It
lake,
feels like a
right?
lake, yeah. You're like, oh, but no, it's actually, you don't want to do that at all, because it's just gonna be there. Yeah. Okay. Last slide. I don't need to go over this, but just this is the book that I used. Was an ebook. And the Facebook group was awesome. And then these are some other books. I read this one because the library had it. I have not read these two, but they have heard good things. I'll probably read them, honestly, soon, just to see if I can get any more ideas. Yeah.
Will you be sharing this slideshow?
Yeah, so I'll post the link to the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Really? Very good.
Thanks to all.
With the perforated tubing, do you find sand and biofilm together ever clog the holes?
Right.
And do you have a
No.
manual way
So
to-
the biofilm, I mean, to be fair, I can't, like, it's buried, so I
Yeah,
can't,
you
like,
can't
go in
see,
and
yeah.
find out. I could, like, snake a camera in there, but essentially, it's part of why you use, if you are using sand, you use the gravel first.
Yeah.
So the gravel will prevent, just cover it, preventing sand from getting in. Specifically, in my case, if you are using sand, gravel, and then a layer of this stuff called non-woven geotextile. It's used as like a weed block. It's really commonly used in natural swimming pool building as like an overliner and an underliner to protect the liner, and in this case to prevent sand from getting in here. But the gravel's not a problem. The biofilm isn't really a problem because it's like, it doesn't like float in the water. It's like, it's a term for like colonies of bacteria that are on surfaces.
Yeah.
So certainly it's been colonized, and like it's on the surfaces, but it doesn't clog.
Not enough to resist
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a thin layer. Not something you would like, see or anything. You probably see some like algae in there. That's a different thing. That's different from biofilm. And the algae will decrease as the pond gets more mature and the plants get more stable.
The thing I didn't understand was on the diagram where you had that perforated pipe in a circle, and then you showed how you had the pumps. Are they attached to that or just outside of?
So this part was turning out to be difficult to understand, so I'm going to do a quick explanation here, just using random stuff. Imagine that this space here is the swimming zone of your pool, and then this couch here would be the walls, the shelf that forms the planted zone. So this would be what you're going to make out of the 3 or 4 inch drain pipe. It's going to look something like this. Note that there's a T here, a tube here. This part is going to be perforated tubing. This will not be. Then that'll be placed about there. You'll cover this with your retaining wall, so either sandbags in my case, or some people use lumber. Then an air stone will go in here. You might snake it in from the top like I did, or you might cut some sort of hole here and insert the tube from the bottom. This is going to obviously go to your air compressor. And then this perforated part here is going to be covered, of course, with gravel. And then the perforated pipe will, well, hey, Waffle. So air will be pushed out of the air stone, which will make the water inside this tube lighter, and it will push the water up. So that in turn will create suction and pull water through here. So since water is being pulled through here, it'll further down get pulled through this perforated pipe. So this doesn't really have to be a ring. There's nothing about this that requires a circular shape. It's, well, actually it would look more like this, but this is just in order to spread things out and get good surface area for sucking water in through. And it's going to suck through this gravel, which is going to act as a biofilter. And also you're going to have your plants planted above here, and those are going to suck nutrients out. So you're basically constantly pulling in water past the gravel, which has the biofilm, and also past the plant roots, which is going to be cleaning your water really effectively, all just powered using this one air stone. And here's a quick video of me setting that up in my actual pool, specifically the part where I make the ring out of the perforated pipe and then connect that using a T-joint to a segment of non-perforated pipe.
So your berm is pretty much made out of sand mostly?
The berm around it, so you're talking about this or around the pond, like outside the pond?
Like what I see, you know, like you see the hump right there.
Yeah,
That's
so
all
under
sand
the liner, yeah, it's all sand. It's all just stuff we excavated and then dumped.
at the edge. You
So that's
excavated
all
and
sand.
dumped at the edge.
Yeah.
So whatever it was sand.
Yeah, it's because that's just what we've got
That's what
here.
you had.
Yeah.
So you built it up when you were excavating.
Yeah, and that, but like, we chose an upland spot anyway, so like, because this naturally was already a higher spot
Yeah.
in the yard, so we wouldn't have really had a problem with runoff anyway, but that's sort of the idea, is to make that little berm, and it prevents the runoff, and it's just sand underneath the liner.
And your tubing's under there too.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing.
Or the tubing kind of extends into the water too.
Sorry. Yeah,
right?
the
The
tubing
black
is,
circular tubing.
yeah, the tubing is on the other side of the liner. It's above the liner, so it's not really in the berm. The tubing is above the liner.
Okay.
Obviously, because it's interfacing with the water. So if you look at this again,
Where does the liner start on
so
there?
this is the liner right here,
Okay.
and up here.
So it is above the liner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Right,
it's
because it has
all-
to filter the water.
It's all above the
Above the
liner.
line. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you keep track of how many hours you've spent?
I was gonna say.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah,
Certainly-
because they asked me how many hours it took me to do that, and I had to calculate hours.
certainly hundreds, like, not
Oh,
over
I
1,000.
had to figure it out in hours.
Probably not over
It
500.
took me
No, I'm
4
saying,
weeks.
But again, like most of the
Yeah.
time I spent was on stupid stuff that I screwed up. Like,
But you need to
If
do
you-
the stupid stuff
Yeah,
to
yeah.
teach us.
yeah, or I could have talked to people and then
Or we
learned from
could have
their
done it
mistakes first.
permanently.
If we do have more questions to ask you, are you?
Yes.
Alright.
We'll go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not like super familiar with the Facebook group. It just like came up in the feed, and I was like, oh hell yeah.
Yeah, my email's on here. So if you're on the Facebook event, I'm gonna add the presentation. My email will be in there. I'll also you can Facebook message me or whatever.
Okay.
Literally would be so excited to help if you're interested.